Hello, welcome to our lesson on the driving question, how do I use ratio and proportion with decimals? This is part 1, part 2 will be coming up over the next few days. So to start with, a little bit of fluency work, so this is all stuff that you should be quite familiar with. So I would ask you to pause the video for now and have a go at answering these questions. So pause the lesson, restart it when you're ready to continue. Okay, so which of these ratios are equivalent to 2 to 3? Well, we can divide, 3 to 5, both the prime numbers, you can't simplify them, so that can't equal 2 to 3. 6 to 9 can both be divided by 3, and that will get us to 2 to 3. 14 to 21 can both be divided by 7, which will get us to 2 to 3. Sorry, we missed out 5 to 16. Obviously, they can't be divided by any numbers that are the same. That doesn't work. 12 and 19 won't work because 12 is a prime number. 30 and 45 can both be divided by 15, and that will get us to 2 to 3. And 4 to 9 at the end don't have any factors in common, so they can't be divided. So the answers should be 6 to 9, 14 to 21, 30 to 45. So the next question, which of the fractions are equivalent? Well, it's almost identical. It's 6 over 9 to 2 over 3. It's 6 over 9, 14 over 21, 13 over 45. So the same numbers again. Question 2. The bar is split into equal parts. Write down the ratio of red to blue parts. Well, there are 3 red parts to 6 blue parts. So we start off with a ratio of 3 to 6. However, we can simplify both of those by dividing them by 3 to give us a final ratio of 1 to 2. What proportion of the parts are red and blue? Well, altogether, 1 part out of every 3 is red. 2 parts out of every 3 are blue. We get that from this ratio by adding them together, or we could have started back here and said altogether there are 9. There are 3 out of 9 will become 1 out of 3. 6 out of 9 will simplify down to 2 out of 3. Share £20 in the ratio of 3 to 2. So we start off with our £20. We add the 2 numbers in the ratio together. 2 plus 3 makes 5. So altogether there are 5 shares. What's each share worth? Well, each share is worth 20 divided by 5, which is 4. So one person gets £8, the other gets £12. If you add those together, you get 20, which sort of checks that that answer is correct. So those were the numbers we were looking for there, 8 and 12. In the next one, the process is exactly the same. We start off by adding the 2 numbers in the ratio together. 4 plus 5 is 9. 36 divided by 9 is 4. So each share is worth £4. The first person gets 4 shares, so 4 times 4 is 16. The second person gets 5 shares. 5 times 4 is 20. And the last question, a piece of rope 24 meters long is cut in the ratio 5 to 3. How long is each piece of rope? Let's just put the pound sign in front of those just to make it a bit clearer. So we divide it over 24 meters. We start off by adding the 2 numbers in the ratio together. 5 plus 3 is 8. 24 divided by 8 because there's 8 shares, so what's each share worth? Each share is worth 24 divided by 8, which is 3. 5 times 3 is 15 meters. 3 times 3 is 9 meters. So those are the numbers that we should be looking for there. All of this we should be quite familiar with because it's things we've done before. Okay, if you need to do any corrections, please do so now. You may need to replay the lesson a little bit because obviously you can't see everything on the screen. But as soon as you're ready to rejoin, please rejoin the lesson. So my next piece of work that we're going to look at today is a worked example. Share 114 between Alice, Bird and Chen in the ratio of 5 to 2 to 1. I'm going to do this one in real time on the board. So what I suggest you do is you get ready to write this down as I'm going through it. So here's a question. Share £114 between Alice, Bird and Chen in the ratio of 5 to 2 to 1. The method, even though I've got three numbers, is exactly the same. I'm going to start by adding 5 to 2 to 1, which equals 8. So I'll just take my glasses off. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do 114 divided by 8. Now, unfortunately, I don't know my 114 times my 8 times table all the way up to 114. So I'm going to do this as a division sum. So my obvious thing to do is to break out the bus stop. I'll put 114 in there. How many 8s in 1? There aren't any, so I carry the 1. How many 8s in 11? There's 1. Remainder 3. How many 8s in 34? There's 4. Remainder 2. Now I've come to the end of the number, so I've got to carry on after the decimal point. I'm going to just write down a 0 there. I might have to extend that a bit. How many 8s in 20? There are 2 8s in 20. Remainder 4. How many 8s in, sorry, I should put down a 0. How many 8s in 40? There are 5, and there is no remainder. So that's my answer, 14.25. So one share is £14.25. So Alice, I'm just going to write A, gets 5 times £14.25, which will equal, well, 5 times 5 is 25, put down a 5, carry the 2, 5 times 2 is 10, add 2 is 12, put down a 2, carry the 1, I've reached the decimal point, 2 numbers after the decimal point in the question, 2 numbers after the decimal point in the answer, 5 times 4 is 20, plus 1 is 21, put down a 1, carry a 2, 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. So Alice gets 71.25. Bert is 2 times £14.25, which is a bit easier to do. That's going to be 50 pence, and double 14 is 28, so that's going to be 28 pence. And finally, and lastly, C gets 1 times £14.25, which equals £14.25. And that's my 3 amounts. If you need to spend some time going back over that, please do so. The process is exactly the same as the previous ones, other than the fact in this case I had to do a long division sum. You won't always have to do that, but obviously sometimes you do. Other than that, it's exactly the same. If you need to, get yourself a calculator to work through those yourselves. Make certain that you understand exactly what you're doing before you go any further. Okay. If you need to, pause the lesson now and catch up when you're ready to continue. So, next element is time for you to do some calculations by yourselves. All of these numbers will break down into decimals a little bit. Not huge, they're not that bad. If you feel that you might need a calculator, please go. You can use one for these. Yes, you probably need one for the last one. The others you should be okay at. Okay, so when you're ready, pause the lesson, turn it back on when you're ready for the answers. Okay, so working our way down through these. The first one, £3.50 in the ratio 2 to 3. I add 2 to 3 to get 5. I divide £3.50 by 5, gives me 70 pence, or 0.7. 0.7 times 2 is £1.40. 3 times 0.7 is £2.10. So those are the answers that I'm looking for. The next one, I'm dividing 6.3 meters in the ratio of 4 to 5. 4 plus 5 is 9. 6.3 divided by 9 is 0.7. Again, 4 times 0.7 is 2.8. 5 times 0.7 is 3.5. And again, you don't have to add the numbers together at the end. These are the answers that you require. 19.2 kilometers in the ratio 5 to 3. 5 to 3 is, 5 add 3 is 8. Now I've got to divide 19.2 by 8. You can either do it as a bus stop, or if you reach for the calculator, that's fine. You should get 2.4 both ways. Then 5 times 2.4 is 12 kilos. 3 times 2.4 is 7.2. And lastly, $2,035.60 in the ratio of 3 to 7. This looks quite complicated to begin with, but at least when you add 7 to 3 you get 10. So it's a nice and easy division. You end up with £203.56. 7 times £203.56. Sorry, 3 times, sorry, my mistake, it's the way I've written that. Yeah, 3 times £203.56 is £610.68. 7 times £203.56 is £1,424.92. If you add those together, you'll get back to where we started. If you need to pause the lesson now to look at any corrections or to write any corrections, please do so. Please make certain that you have written down your corrections and you understand if you made any errors. Right, so this is quite a long question for you to look at. I'll read it out to you, and then we shall start it. In a company's website team, there are 5 programmers, 3 graphic artists, and 2 copywriters. What's the ratio of programmers to graphic artists to copywriters? The team win a £500 prize for one of their websites. Prize money is to be shared equally. How much should the graphic artists receive? So how much money will be split between the graphic artists? What proportion of the team, so we're now looking at something a little bit different, are graphic artists, and what proportion are copywriters? 1 more graphic artist and 1 more copywriter are employed. What is the ratio of programmers to graphic artists to copywriters now? What proportion of the team is graphic artists now? What proportion of the team is copywriters now? So, that looks like a lot of writing, but once you actually start breaking it down, the actual maths isn't that complicated and isn't really that strenuous. So, I'd just ask you now to work your way through it, or pause the lesson, work your way through it, turn the lesson back on when you're ready to continue. Okay, so working my way through it. 5 programmers, 3 graphic artists, 2 copywriters. The ratio is very easy. It's 5 to 3 to 2. Remember, you write down the ratio in the order that the words are written. So it's 5 to 3 to 2. So now I've got to divide my £500 in the ratio of 5 to 3 to 2. I add the numbers together. I get 10. 500 divided by 10 is 50. So each person is going to receive £50. There are 3 graphic artists, so I just need to work out that 3 times 50 is 150. Notice I don't work out the other 2. The question doesn't ask me to. I could have done, but the question didn't ask me. If you work the other 2 out, don't worry, you haven't made a mistake, but you don't need to either. So try and always answer the question as it's written, not just what you think you should do. So, what proportion of the team are currently graphic artists? Right, so there are 2 graphic artists. Let me push that up. Sorry, there are 3 graphic artists, and there are 10 people altogether. So the proportion of people who are graphic artists is 3 over 10. Similarly, in copywriters, there are 2 copywriters out of 10 people. So you've got a proportion of 2 over 10, or 2 tenths, which you should then simplify to its simplest form, which is 1/5, 1 over 5. Part D. One more graphic artist and 1 more copywriter are employed. What is the ratio of programmers to graphic artists to copywriters now? Well, now we've still got 5 programmers, that hasn't changed. We've added a graphic artist, so now we have 4 graphic artists, and we've added a copywriter, so now we've got 3 copywriters. So now, altogether, we have 5, add 4, add 3, which is 12 people employed. So, what proportion of the team is graphic artists? 4 out of 12 are graphic artists, which we can simplify down by dividing both the numbers by 4 to 1 over 3. 3 out of 12 are copywriters, which we can simplify by dividing both the numbers by 3 to 1 over 4. So those are the answers that I'm looking for this question. If you need to do any corrections, or you need to look back and see what I've done, please pause the lesson now, go through what you need to do, and rejoin when you're ready to continue. Okay, so now we've got another work example that I'm going to do in a moment. Simplify 40 to 28.5 into whole number ratio in its simplest form. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is write this down with me, but listening and paying attention. If necessary, obviously pause the video or pause the tape to run back through it to make certain that you understand. The first thing that I'm going to do in this case is to try and make both of these numbers into whole numbers. The way I'm going to do that, in the same way as you can with fractions, if you multiply both the numbers by the same number, they effectively stay the same. I'm going to do that with these numbers as well. So what I'm going to do with my 40 to 80 to, my 40 to 28.5 is I'm going to multiply both of the numbers by 10. That keeps their proportion the same, and it will make them both whole numbers. I'm multiplying by 10 because I have 1 place of decimals. If I had 2 places of decimals, I would multiply by 100. Because if I had 3 places of decimals, I would multiply by 1,000. You want a number with the same number of zeros as there are decimal places. If I do that, if I multiply both of these numbers by 10, I get 400 to 285. So now I've got whole numbers. Fantastic. Unfortunately, I haven't finished because the question says simplify into a whole number ratio in its simplest form. So I must have these numbers as small as possible. In order to do that, to make them as small as possible, or to check to see if they're as small as possible, I have to find a number that I can divide them both by. Well, this one ends in a 0, this one ends in a 5. That means I can divide them by 5. If I divide them by 5, there's 25s in 100, so there must be 85s in 400. There are 17 5s in 85, plus 40 for the 200. So 17 add 40 is 57. So now I've got 80 and 57. Now, in order to me to check to see if I need to go any further, if I look at 80, 80 is 2 to the 4th times 5 in prime factors. 57 is 3 times 19. There are no factors in common between these two numbers. Because of that, these are the simplest forms I can get it. So my answer is 80 to 57. Whenever you deal with simplification, look at the factors and try and find factors in common that you can remove. In this case, there's only 5, so that's my answer. Okay, if you need some time to write that down or to understand it, pause the lesson and return when you're ready to continue. Next thing for you to do is some work on this topic by yourself. This is exactly the same as the question that I just did. Find a number that you can multiply them by, a power of 10. It's normally going to be 10, but there may be some that may be a little bit different, and then simplify back. When you're ready, pause the lesson and restart when you're looking for the answers. So my first one, 70 to 13.5, multiplied by 10 gives me 700 and 135, which I can divide by 5 gives me 140 to 27. 140 is 10 times, 20 times 7. 27 is 3 times 9. There are no factors in common, so that's my ratio. Next one, 70 to 51.2, again multiplied by 10 gives me 700 to 512. The largest number I could find to divide this by was 4, which gave me 175 and 128. If you divided this by 2 and then divided it by 2 again, you would have still got these numbers, because remember, dividing by 4 is the same as dividing by 2 and then dividing by 2 again. For my next one, again multiplied 25.5 to 17 and multiplied them by 10. I got those. I divided them both by 5, and that gave me 51 to 34. Now, if you're a darts player, you would recognise 51 as 3 17s and 34 as 2 17s. So both of these numbers are divisible by 17, which gives me the ratio of 3 to 2. The next one is a multiply by 10 again to start. Gives me these numbers. The biggest number I saw straight away was 8. which gave me these numbers. And lastly, I could divide them by 6 again, which gave me these. Which means I could have divided them both by 48 right at the beginning. So this ratio is 7 to 1 to 5. E 28.6 and 5.15. Now I've got two numbers after the decimal point here, so to make this one work, I had to divide it. I had to multiply it by 100 to turn this into a whole number, which gave me these numbers. Again, because they end in a 0 and a 5, they're divisible by 5. When I did that, I got these. 103 is a prime number. 572 does not go into 103, so, or 103 does not go into 572, so I couldn't get any further with that, so this was the only simplification I could do. And lastly, 1.05, 1.68 and 21, which again I had to multiply by 100, it gave me these numbers. When I started looking at 168, I got 21 as a factor. When I got 21 as a factor, I just divided them all by 21, which gave me 528 to 100, and there's nothing much I can do with those. So those are the numbers that you could do. You could divide this by 3 and you could divide it by 7 straight afterwards. You will still get to these numbers, 528 to 100. So if you need to go back over this to get your corrections and to understand, please do so now, then rejoin the lesson. Okay, another question for you. This is a question that's in a little bit of context. It's all about triathlons. Don't worry if you don't know what a triathlon is or you're not interested in it. It doesn't matter for this. Just look at the way, look at the way the questions are built and work your way through the question. So you're looking at what ratio of a swim to cycle to run for each race. Simplify each ratio to a whole number ratio in its simplest form. So we are looking for whole numbers. And then what proportion of the Olympic triathlon is this? Okay, so when you're ready, pause the lesson and get ready to start on your work. When you've got your mark, when you're ready to get your marks, please turn the lesson back on. So the first thing I did was I just wrote down the numbers again, so I have them there. So the sprint, to turn them all into whole numbers, I had to multiply by 100, and I then divided those numbers by 5, and then I divided those numbers by 5 again, and I got 3 to 80 to 20. I could have just divided by 25 right at the beginning, and I would have got the same. The Olympic only had to multiply by 10 this time, and when I divided by 5, I got 3 to 80 to 20 again, which, as you can see, is exactly the same proportion as the sprint, just the numbers were bigger. The Half-Ironman, a little bit different. 1.990, 21.1, multiplied by 10. I got these numbers, nothing I could do with them. 19 is a prime number, 900 does not go into it, so nothing else is going to work. And lastly, the Ironman. Looked at the numbers, only one place of decimal, so I multiplied by 10. I got these numbers, all these numbers are even, so I could divide them by 2. And again, I've got 19 there, which is a prime number. 901 does not go into 19. and 211 is, or 19 does not go into 211 either, so we're okay there. Almost exactly the same as the Half-Ironman, but a slight difference there. That extra 0.2 of a kilometre makes a difference. So the last thing that we were asked to do is what proportion of the Olympic triathlon is swimming, cycling and running. Well, the first thing we have to do is to find out what's the total. Well, we've got 3 and 80 at 20, which makes 103, so everything is over 103 as a fraction. Swimming is 3 over 103, because as we mentioned, 103 is prime. You can't really do anything with it at that point. So cycling is 80 over 103 and running is 20. Swimming is 3 over 103, cycling is 80 over 103, running is 20 over 103. Okay. If you need to replay the lesson to write any of that, get any corrections written down, please do so now. Rejoin when you're ready. Well, that brings us to the end of this first part of this topic. I hope you understand it. If necessary, please replay this lesson. Try, concentrate on the bits that you found difficult with. Make certain that you understand, because we're going to be building on this topic in our next lesson. We're going to be carrying on with this type of work. Okay, thank you for your time. Goodbye.